Real quick before I begin this video, for those who didn't grow up in the New York City area, let me start by saying that incidents like the one I'm going to be discussing today used to happen out here all the time back in the day. Just complete chaos at theaters, depending on the groups that came across one another and the movies that were playing. Now I know for a fact that this definitely happened in other places too, but all my experiences come from right here in this city. Violence erupting on these streets is nothing new, and it wasn't just theaters that it used to happen at. There used to be a lot of violence at arcades that we used to have out here, music stores, pretty much anywhere that groups would congregate or get together. Now of course, not everybody is out here looking for problems, but there are some times where those problems find you instead. You could just be out there with your friends having a good time and find yourself in the middle of something that you never anticipated. In some cases, it can cost people their lives. I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to those who came forward and shared their memories of Lakeem Surles, who we'll be discussing today. For those who've been on the channel before, you know I have a thing for intros that somehow tie into the story. But for those who are here for the first time, if intros aren't your thing and you want to go straight to the story, the timestamp right here is where you want to go. I'd also appreciate it if you took a moment to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. Or if you're new and you appreciate the content that's here, feel free to subscribe and hit a like on the video. The support truly does go a long way, and as always, it's very much appreciated. Now with that being said, I do have to warn that today's video is going to contain some details that might be disturbing for some, so please do keep that in mind. Viewer discretion is strongly advised.
18-year-old Lakeem Surles of Crown Heights was killed in the Metropolitan Cineplex at the Fulton Mall. The shooting occurred during the showing of Judgment Night, a film that is described as a violent, action-packed thriller.
Today's story takes place in 1993 and brings us to the Fulton Street Mall in Brooklyn, New York. Going back as far as the late 19th century, the commercial strip on Fulton Street in Brooklyn, New York has been lined with stores of all kinds, making it one of New York City's most visited shopping districts. For many who grew up in Brooklyn and even outside of the borough, it's always been a go-to spot for whatever one might need, especially when the school season is about to begin. The half-mile-long shopping strip is known as the Fulton Street Mall, an outdoor mall consisting of various businesses of all types. Every year, around mid to late August, a trip to Fulton Street was mandatory for my family, getting ready for the school season. The streets were lined with different clothing stores and countless parents getting that shopping in for an affordable price. Stores like VIM and Young World. If by chance Fulton didn't have what you needed, 3rd Ave in the Bronx or the shopping strip in Harlem were also options, no particular order. But the strip on Fulton had pretty much anything you needed. You had everything from clothing to electronics to the latest releases and mixtapes in hip-hop, available at the well-known Music Factory, located at 472 Fulton Street. Even way back, long before our time, Fulton Street was known as a premier destination for shopping. The streets were filled with expensive furniture stores, stationaries that sold Christmas cards, shops that sold premium furniture, and even human hair boutiques. If you walk the strip today, right where that Five Below is, that's where the old Woolworth used to be, the largest of the Woolworth stores back when it first opened. Much later on, in 1992, tensions would begin to rise in downtown Brooklyn, with a few thousand people taken to the streets, marching down Fulton Street, the Brooklyn Bridge, and Tobin Plaza at the World Trade Center, all in protest of Rodney King, who had been brutally beaten by officers in Los Angeles. The officers guilty of the crime had just been acquitted. Fulton Street was also well known and visited for its local theaters, one of them being the Cineplex Odeon Metropolitan, or the Lowe's Metropolitan Theater, a theater that had undergone various changes throughout its lifespan. The theater opened its doors way back in the fall of 1918. By the winter of 1978, it was made into a 4-screen theater by Lowe's, with Cineplex Odeon taking over in the winter of '89. For those who lived close by, it was among the easiest theaters to visit and enjoy a night at the movies. Many could just leave their homes, and they were walking distance from the theater. The Metropolitan would draw people from the surrounding area on a weekly basis, with the theater showing some of the biggest films out back then. It was a go-to location. Sometimes kids would sneak in through the roof or side entrance to get access and see movies for free. The year 1993 saw the release of films like Jurassic Park, Mrs. Doubtfire, The Fugitive, Menace to Society, A Bronx Tale, and Fire in the Sky, just to name a few. Without a doubt, a big year for memorable films that are still talked about and watched today. Over the years, the surrounding area and Fulton Street itself started to change. Business owners along Fulton Street started to raise concerns about the safety in the neighborhood. Being that it was such a well-known and visited shopping strip, robberies became more and more common. While most of the crime was being committed after the sunset when stores were already closing up shop, the daytime wasn't that much safer. Owner of the former Newcastle Jewelers on Fulton Street had the following to say: "It's gotten worse. We are always on the lookout. People are being robbed every day in broad daylight. You have to have eyes in the back of your head." Now, by the fall of 1993, there were still plenty of movies that were drawing people to the theaters. Movies like The Nightmare Before Christmas and Demolition Man, for example. There was always a reason to get a hold of some tickets and make a night of it, especially after a long work or school week. There was definitely something for everyone, no matter what your taste in film was. But just one film released in 1993 would be tied to a scene of grief and absolute devastation in Brooklyn, New York. A truly tragic incident that unfolded right inside the theater as it was being premiered to an audience on its opening night. The name of that movie was Judgment Night. The film Judgment Night stars Cuba Gooding Jr., Emilio Estevez, Dennis Leary, Stephen Dorff, New York Undercover's Michael De Lorenzo, the late Peter Green, Jeremy Piven, and Eric Schrody, better known by his stage name, Everlast, the frontman of House of Pain. The movie surrounds a group of friends in Chicago heading into the city for a boxing match. All is well until they decide to take a shortcut to the fight after getting caught in traffic, leading to a horrible sequence of events unfolding. They witness the shooting of a man right on the street, leading to them being chased all through Cabrini Green by a group of men who want to silence them. The motion picture soundtrack will feature collaborations between Onyx and Biohazard, Ice-T and Slayer, and House of Pain with Helmet, among others. Every track on the soundtrack being a mesh of hip-hop and metal, or alternative metal. The movie was released on Friday, October 15th of 1993. On that day, the Metropolitan on Fulton Street played 4 movies: Demolition Man, Cool Runnings, The Good Son, and Judgment Night. Going against the likes of Wesley Snipes and Sylvester Stallone at the box office was no easy feat, as the film struggled to meet its box office projections. At the Metropolitan, only 56 people total would purchase tickets to the 9:45 p.m. showing of the film on the night of its release. One of those people was an 18-year-old man from Kingston Ave in Brooklyn, New York. His name was Lakeem Surles. Lakeem Cool Tom Surles was born on September 24th of 1975. He was described as someone who was kind and loving to his family and those he cared for. According to those who knew him, he was also the kind of person who carried himself a certain way and would never tolerate disrespect from anyone. He was said to be feared by those who weren't on his good side. A friend stated he was respected and liked by many and was a good kid growing up along with his brothers, but later on in life, he had found himself caught up in a certain lifestyle because it's what he came up knowing and what he grew up around. It was said that he was someone that you had to get to know before he showed you who he truly was, but he always had a good heart. On this evening, Lakeem made his way into the Metropolitan Theater ready to check out Judgment Night, like he had done so many times in the past with other films. The previews ran and the movie started. An average night out at the movies. But that would all change at exactly 10:42 p.m. According to witnesses and family, Lakeem was in the theater with some of his friends when he bumped into someone he knew, who had also arrived with friends. Early police reports stated that Lakeem had gone to the movies alone, but either way, there were people in the theater that he knew, some of which were his friends. Lakeem had apparently seen someone he had problems with when entering the theater early on, and once inside of the theater room, as the movie played on, words were exchanged between them, leading to an argument that made everyone inside turn their heads. The argument quickly escalated, with Lakeem and the man who was around the same age as he was getting into a full-blown fistfight right by the front of the screen. Within moments of the altercation beginning, it was stated that Lakeem had the upper hand and was winning the fight, but the fight wouldn't last very long, because as friends of the person he fought looked on, one of those friends decided it was time for a violent interjection. He would start reaching for his weapon. As Lakeem struggled with the other man and kept striking him, still very much in control of the fight, the man pointed his pistol at Lakeem's back and began firing, hitting him 3 times in his back, with all bullets coming out of his chest. Within seconds, others either involved or close to the melee started to pull out their pieces too, shooting back and forth at each other in an almost pitch-black theater. It would cause instant chaos. Everyone in that theater room began screaming and running for their lives, making for the front and side entrances of the theater. Some said the shooting lasted about a minute, which doesn't seem like a long time, but for anyone who's ever been in the middle of a shootout like this, they'll tell you that that 1 minute feels like forever. Those in the neighboring theater rooms watching the other films heard it all, and they feared that they would just get caught up in the crossfire. They followed suit, taking for the exits, just trying to make it out alive. Others took cover on the floor and behind the seats, hoping that they would make it back home, praying a stray bullet wouldn't claim their lives. Some were even able to see the bright flashes of the gunfire as the bullets zipped over their heads. To go from a simple night out at the movies to being in the center of a full-blown war zone wasn't on anyone's mind. A prime example of how things can go from perfectly normal to terrifying with no control of the outcome. A short while after, the gunfire stopped, and all that could be heard was the commotion of the shooters as they ran, fleeing the scene. The end result was a shooting that injured 4. One was a woman who had been caught in the middle of the hectic scene. She was shot in the buttocks and taken to St. Vincent's Hospital, where she was listed as in stable condition. A man was shot in both arms and one of his legs and taken to the same hospital. He was listed as in critical but stable condition. One more man was shot in his arms and also listed as in critical but stable condition, but he was taken to Bellevue Hospital. But Lakeem Surles, who was taken to Brooklyn Hospital, was pronounced dead on arrival from his critical wounds. While one of the weapons recovered did belong to Lakeem, it was confirmed that he never actually fired it. The first shots to ring out were the ones that struck him in the back, so he never even had the chance. It was stated that those shots rang out around the same time in the movie where a man is executed and 4 men witness it. They run for their lives, and here was a room full of people doing the exact same thing, some fearing that they might have seen too much and they might be next. While Lakeem could have easily pulled his own weapon the moment the fight started, he kept it at just fists, indicating that taking someone's life that night was not his goal. Unfortunately, not everyone thinks the same way. In a matter of minutes, the room turned into a scene of devastation. Police were now all over Fulton Street and inside the theater trying to make sense of the scene. When they searched the theater room that the shooting took place in, they would recover a total of 4 weapons: a .357 Magnum, a .22 caliber, a .32 caliber, and a .380 semi-automatic, but they had no idea what weapon belonged to who at first, and they didn't have anyone in custody. They would find spent shell casings all over the scene, 16 total. Everyone fled the minute that the gunfire stopped, and they were long gone by the time police arrived. It wouldn't take long for news of the chaos to make its way around. Between that night and the next afternoon, every news outlet had a camera crew and reporter on Fulton Street covering the tragedy.
From an unfolding drama in the courtroom to a deadly drama in a Brooklyn theater, it was mayhem at the movies when gunfire erupted during the late show of a new action adventure. 1 person died in a spray of bullets, 3 others were injured. Here's Bertha Coombs with details.
Investigators say the action-adventure Judgment Night was not a factor in the deadly shootout that erupted during the Friday late show at the Metropolitan Theater. It was a question of young men fighting with big guns.
There were 4 guns recovered, a 380 automatic, a 357, and 2 .32 calibers. There was evidence of one gun, a 9mm, which was not recovered.
Police say at least 3 gunmen fired 16 rounds. 2 men and 1 woman were critically wounded. 19-year-old Lakeem Surles was killed. The shootout broke out 40 minutes into the movie. One of Surles' friends who was there says it was the result of a long-standing feud.
They didn't care who they shot. They were shooting everywhere. Everywhere. Even one of the guys, they got shot too, I believe. But they was just going crazy.
A number of moviegoers say the theater needs to have more security to prevent more violence such as this. Many say security guards should be armed with metal detectors. Valeria thinks it might have saved her nephew from being shot.
They should. Because you really don't know what anybody's bringing inside the movies,
Some say they'll just avoid seeing movies here.
I look forward to coming here every Saturday because not only that they show good movies, you get to see a movie for $4, and that cannot be compared to other places. But it's not worth life.
And as one of Surles' family friends put it, young men's arguments which lead to gunfire aren't worth the lives they cost either. In Brooklyn, I'm Bertha Coombs, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
So far, police have not made any arrests in this bloody shootout, but the cops say they do have a good idea who they are looking for in this case.
In the days following the tragedy at the Metropolitan, there were still no arrests. It would be learned that the shooting might have been connected to an incident from 2 years before, when a cousin of Lakeem's was kidnapped, and apparently, the person he saw in the theater that night was somehow involved. His cousin stated that partly because of that incident, Lakeem always carried something with him. The semi-automatic found at the scene was said to be his. Authorities had several people of interest in their sights, but no luck actually tracking them down. As detectives continued to piece together the scene and interview anyone they could, Lakeem was soon to be laid to rest by his family. A service was held at the Lawrence Woodard Funeral Home in Brooklyn, New York. Family and friends were in attendance, very much grief-stricken and in shock at what had taken place just days before. For those close to him, a loved one who was just 18 years old losing his life like this wasn't easy to accept. The way many saw it, it wasn't him who shot up that theater or felt the need to pull his weapon, but the end result would be a tragedy all the same. Lakeem was taken to Rosedale and Rose Hill Cemetery in Union County, New Jersey for burial. In the weeks that followed, no arrests had been made. Business owners and residents in the area were interviewed more and more, but nothing ever came of it. Being that the theater was so dark and it all happened so fast, it made it difficult to really identify anyone who might have been involved. Some expressed no surprise that there was a shooting at the Metropolitan. Some who worked at the theater and attended stated that there were often problems with security and people sneaking in guns. There were known to be a lot of fights during evening showings, and lots of problems regarding the cleanliness of the theater. None of this was new. This just happened to be the night that things went way too far. Some felt that they would only feel safe if the theater had metal detectors, even if the business was known to have private security. It just wasn't enough. Metal detectors were starting to be put in more high schools across the city at the time. Other moviegoers vowed to never go back to the theater after what happened. It wasn't the area's first experience like this either. A similar incident occurred at the nearby Duffield Twin Theater, just off Fulton Street. That incident took place in 1991, and it was during a 9:40 p.m. showing of New Jack City, featuring Wesley Snipes, Alan Payne, and Ice-T, a classic. On the evening of March 8th of 1991, after the movie was over at around 11:40 p.m., two groups started to fight inside the theater, a shoving match that had apparently quickly gone beyond words. The groups went outside to the front of the theater and almost instantly began shooting at each other. More than 100 shots were fired. According to reports, a 19-year-old man named Gabriel Williams, who was also involved in the shooting, was killed by a bullet to the chest. He was able to run down the street and around the corner before he collapsed on the ground. The Duffield Theater closed shortly after. New Jack City would also be tied to a scene of chaos in Los Angeles, California, when a theater oversold tickets. An angry mob upwards of 1,500 people would start rioting. Gangs shot at each other, with a driver getting hit in the leg during the crossfire. Chicago had a lot going on too. The same thing happened with the movie Juice. When it came to witnesses at the Metropolitan Theater, anyone who did know who started the shooting wasn't talking to police. In situations like this, many would prefer to keep quiet and not involve themselves out of fear of retaliation. Being that most who went to that theater lived in the surrounding area, it could easily come back to them. The day after the shooting, business went on as usual, with moviegoers walking in and out of the theater as blood still dried on the sidewalk. A small sign of the terror that had erupted there not even a day before. Any persons of interest were nowhere to be found as detectives searched the entire borough, moving on the little information that they were able to gather. Some of the information was good, while the rest of it was wrong. Very common as more and more time passes and people's recollections of events begin to change. Authorities feared that, like so many other cases across the 5 boroughs, this case would go unsolved. But just 2 months later, one bit of information would lead them to someone they had been looking for all along. On Saturday, December 11th of 1993, authorities were alerted to a man recovering from a gunshot wound to his leg at Brooklyn Hospital. He had been shot the night before. He was just 17 years old. Police had been looking for him since right after the shooting at the Metropolitan, but they could never catch up to him. He was taken into custody by detectives and identified by several witnesses in a lineup as the man who pulled out his gun first, the person who shot Lakeem in the back 3 times. He wasn't charged with the shooting of the other 3 people, since authorities couldn't confirm if the shots came from him. But when it came to Lakeem, he was charged with criminal possession of a weapon and second-degree murder. Once the suspect was apprehended, those close to the situation felt good that someone would be brought to justice for taking Lakeem's life, but it would do very little to ease their pain. No matter what was said or done, it could never bring him back. A bittersweet feeling and an overwhelming grief. Due to the suspect's age at the time of the incident, information regarding his sentencing was kept confidential. The tragedy at the Metropolitan Theater would raise major questions about the type of movies that depicted this form of violence on the big screen. The film Judgment Night would be one of many films put under a microscope, with major pressure being put on movie studios to tone it down. The movie was just the latest to be blamed for a tragic outcome. If you walk the Fulton Street Strip today, it's a lot different from back in the day, although some signs of the past still remain. For those who live in the area, they've been here long enough to see the block go through countless changes. Mom and pop businesses that are long gone. The music and clothing stores that everyone would flock to for the latest fashions and tunes. The theater where brothers, sisters, cousins, and parents spent plenty of their Friday and Saturday nights. The Cineplex Odeon Metropolitan Theater at the Fulton Street Mall would close its doors in 1996, just 3 years after the shooting. When it comes to movies influencing real-life tragedies, it seems that the biggest issue and common denominator in all of these was problems that might have already existed between rivals reaching their boiling point. Here you have a place that is drawing people from different parts of the neighborhood. Some of those people might not get along, or they have serious issues, and here they all are in the same place at the same time. It can go south quickly. Sometimes it's over nothing, just the wrong look, or just an argument starting for any random reason. Every one of these situations was a little different, but the end results were exactly the same. A night where someone just meant to enjoy themselves, but they ended up dead, or ended up committing murder. While authorities and officials had many different opinions about the role Hollywood played in this tragedy and others like it seemed like a bigger point was being missed. Issues like guns being easily accessible to the youth, violence among teens and young adults, gang violence, inner cities where there were clearly more pressing issues at hand. Whether it was a theater, a party, or just walking down the street, this probably could have happened anywhere. It wasn't a movie that did it. Half the movies mentioned today are inspired by events that have taken place in real life. The issue has always been there. It's more a matter of when people cross paths, which isn't always easily predictable. For a lot of people growing up, it's just what you're surrounded by. It becomes part of everyday life. Nobody leaves their home thinking that they'll never make it back. From one minute to the next, in just a matter of moments, reality is altered for everyone involved. A moment that can't be undone and can't be taken back. Because unlike in the movies, in life, there are no second takes, and one person's actions in the heat of the moment can change everything, forever. If alive today, Lakeem would be 50 years old. Rest in peace, Lakeem Surles, and my deepest condolences go out to his loved ones. You aren't forgotten.
Shooting occurred during the showing of Judgment Night, starring Emilio Estevez, a film that is described as a violent, action-packed thriller. An electrician who works for the theater complained that many patrons carry guns and sneak into the shows through the roof and through the back doors.